Okay, time to move on to the municipal approval. That was the last thing on the list. You want to say anything more about municipal approval?
I guess the only thing I'll say is that we are still thinking about it. And I think we know very clearly that there's not going to be one size fits all for all municipalities, because that's just not the way the world works. But we are actually looking at a couple of different components of it. One is notification to the local officials, which would probably primarily be through the chief municipal official, the way the 21E notices happen now. A second piece of this is making sure that the project gets whatever local approvals it's required to get. So if there's wetlands jurisdiction, if there needs to be, if there is a reclamation or a soil filling permit that our town has set up, we would need to make sure that that was in place. The third piece is actually notice to the public and opportunity, if the public is interested, to sort of stay abreast of the project and be involved at key points, depending on what the project is and what those points are. And I think the fourth piece, the fourth question here is really what do we really mean when we say local approval outside of the really specific permits that are already required, and any project that you would be doing would need to get those permits no matter what we did. So that's a hard one because there are 5 different forms of municipal government and they're all very different, and what's going to work in a city like Boston or Cambridge, and even there you've got 2 different forms of municipal government. It's not going to be too workable for one of the small towns out in the Berkshires. So I think that we're sort of looking at all of that, and we're going to have some more conversations about it. What we're going to be setting out in the interim policy may very well change as we have these conversations and hopefully start getting some experience with more projects than just the one that's got an ACO that we've issued so far. So I think that's, I don't know if anybody wants to provide us with any more advice than that you didn't give us the last time. Because we do have what you all told us the last time.
We have more advice.
We have more advice from you.
I don't know if I said this last time.
I'll let you know.
Andrew Daniels. My comment goes to timing. When we kind of started this odyssey, we were talking about a new lexicon and setting these standards, which would make it easier for all of the stakeholders to make decisions whether to proceed or not to proceed, whether these facilities are safe or not. And a lot of our experiences, when you start to talk to the municipalities, they immediately say, well, what does the EP say? And so, and I think our other experiences, let's say on cap enclosures, that when we have public meetings in conjunction with the DEP, that's very helpful as the permitting process is going on. So I kind of heard, come to us with your nice, neat package of your municipal approvals, but I would just make a suggestion to think about how that timing works.
The chicken and the egg.
We'll think about it. I have lots of situations where our appearance at a local meeting means absolutely nothing. Our site suitability recommendations for closed landfills routinely get rejected. So yeah, we've got experience on all sides of this.
Yeah, and I think one thing we want to do to kind of change the balance of that is by having the standards in the permitting process, it will be a lot clearer once these regs are out about what DEP thinks about these projects. And what, depending on which box you're in, you'll know very clearly and what the requirements will be and what we think needs to be done. So that may help a lot to have a package to go to the municipality.
Thank you. I was going to add that, and I'd like to add one more thing. And that is that there are particular concerns about these kinds of projects that MassDEP is not in a good position to establish requirements for. Truck routes, clearly. There are public safety concerns depending on what neighborhoods the trucks have to go through. At the same time, there are some things that are of local concern, but clearly within our bailiwick. So if, for instance, diesel emissions are a concern in the community, that's a place where we can step in and say, yeah, there are things you can do to mitigate those emissions. So I think that this is going to have to be that kind of balance. And DEP doesn't want to be in the position, and I think most municipalities don't want us to be in the position of setting requirements for things that really ought to be in local control. And I'm going to be perfectly frank, there are some communities where a project just is not going to get off the ground, and some communities are going to be more accepting and willing to work out mitigation. So I think that this is all we're going to have to figure this out. And it's going to have to be a conversation. So what we need to make sure is that the conversation is happening and that there aren't surprises down the road at a minimum. So are there more? There are a couple of people who weren't part of the discussion a few weeks ago about local approvals, state approvals. The one thing I will say is that we, as Paul has mentioned, in terms of state approvals, is that we are definitely thinking about different flavors of state approvals, where the project taking in soil with higher levels of oil or hazardous materials in a more sensitive location would probably be looking at a more traditional upfront facility-specific approval, permit or approval. And we have actually, I think, a long and good track record in the solid waste and recycling world with facilities that are taking in, or operations that are taking in less problematic material, and they're located in an area where there's less concern. We've got conditional exemptions in our regulations where we don't always even get a notification that the operation is happening. More are happening in the middle, which we're looking at things like general permits, otherwise known as a permit by rule. We would publish the requirements and the performance standards in the regulation, go out and get public comment on it as we go through the review, the public review of the draft. And then an operation in the middle could tell us that this is what they're doing, this is what they're taking in, and file periodic reports with us and certifications that they're in compliance. And we've got a gazillion years of experience with the facility-specific permits. That's kind of the traditional command and control approach. But we've got a lot of experience with these other kinds of approvals, and I think we're really looking to use those where we can.
And those also look a lot like the work that LSPs do.
Right.
Manage something and then report.
Right.
Thank you. Wendy Heiker, Bernays. So you do have a lot of experience with particularly the middle part, and I think some of that experience goes back to what municipalities look like and which are the parties in those particular municipalities who typically either respond or have comment or participate or sign off. We don't have an infinite number of cities and towns in Massachusetts. We have 351. But for some, boards of health are not the place to go, and they wouldn't be sort of your first sort of participatory sign-off. And other places, they may be. And I think that you do have a lot of information at your, available to you from previous permitting operations and types of projects. And that may be useful to take a look and see what works there.
Right, and I think you're right. We do have a lot of that information, Wendy, but the issue is whether DEP is going to be telling a municipality who they need to have sign off.
No, it's a bigger picture. So
Right. This is for the people on the web.
Yeah, it's not about telling them what has to happen, but I think it's about that communication piece with the permitting and who might be at the table to get that conversation about the actual permitting. It's not to suggest that those are the people who have to sign off.
Right, I do think that once, if we proceed with something like this schema, that what we would be doing would be to identify clearly the kinds of operations that we need upfront DEP approvals from, the kinds of operations that only need a general permit from us. And then the local approval may vary. And it's going to depend to some extent on the particular situation that the operation is, the location too. I mean, obviously, we're not going to tell the Concom that all of a sudden it no longer has jurisdiction. It is, that jurisdiction will be whatever it is. So, and Wendy, do you have a?
Yeah, there's a question that came up for,
Does not planning or zoning boards approve or control operations at quarries, sand pits, and gravel pits?
So the answer to that question is sometimes, but by no means always. There are some towns that have adopted particular requirements for local fill permits, and I know of a couple of, they come in a couple of different flavors with different local boards responsible for them, not always the planning and zoning board. And there are certainly really old quarries, sand pits, gravel pits that were started in operation so long ago that they predate today's local approval process. So I think we've got to deal with the situations wherever they are. And by no means does the local planning or zoning board always, we can't, it's been very clear to us that we can't look to them all the time. Sometimes we can. So other questions, concerns? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Matt.
You have the last word, Matt. Schedule going forward? Sorry, I had that.
She was just going to go there.
Well, what I can say is that, as I said before, we are hoping to get this interim policy out as soon as we can. I don't know whether it'll come out before the end of December or whether it'll be in early January. But at least that would kind of set a baseline about how we're going to operate in the short term. And we're looking forward to that, frankly, because there's just been too many discussions in and around particular projects that people want to do. And I think it'll be helpful. We are working on sort of fleshing out the conceptual framework that Paul's laid out. And we're having conversations. At one point, we were planning to try and have a draft regulation that was in good enough shape that we could send it up the chain for review with the hope to get it approved to go out for public comment by the end of this month. It's not going to happen for a lot of reasons. It's general bandwidth. It's one of the big reasons. So I think it's going to be several months. We would like to be out with something for public comment. I'm thinking kind of we've been thinking late February, March timeframe. March is probably more realistic at this point, but we're going to have to see. So that's where we are. And when we have the interim policy posted on the web, we will let everybody know, which reminds me, there are many more people in this room than signed in on the sign-up sheets. So if you didn't sign up, please do on your way out. So, and thank you for coming on a Friday afternoon.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it.
And www.reclamationsoil.com.org. Actually, .com works.